The Almoravids emerged in the 11th century as a force that shaped the history of North Africa and beyond. Founded by the charismatic leader Abdallah ibn Yasin, they blended religious fervor with military prowess, uniting Berber tribes against internal divisions and external threats. Despite their relatively short-lived rule, they left an indelible mark on the Islamic world, influencing subsequent dynasties and contributing to the rich tapestry of North African history. This is the story of the Almoravid dynasty.
Quick announcement, guys. The team is going for a 5-day trip to Seville, Cordoba, Granada, and we would love for you to join. More info in the description down below.
From 788 to 974 CE, Northwest Africa was governed by the Idrisid dynasty, an offshoot of the Umayyads that had fled the Abbasid Caliphate after the massacre in 750. They ultimately fell in 974 as a result of the proxy wars waged between the two rival powers in the region, the Fatimid Caliphate to the east and the Umayyad Caliphate of Cordoba, and the whole region was left in political turmoil for the next 100 years. But within the southern desert tribes of the Sahara, a quiet revolution was starting to take place. A revolution that would change the face of the region in ways no one could have predicted. From the desert lands, a group of mysterious veiled warriors would burst out of their homelands and build an immense empire, stretching from the Senegal River to the Andalusian plains. They are known as the Almoravids, from the Arabic word Al-Murabitun, by their desire to revitalize Islam throughout the region. Armed with nothing more than their faith and an unyielding resolve, the Almoravids shook the region forever. The man who started it all was Yahya ibn Ibrahim, the leader of the Gudala subtribe of Sanhaja. Feeling the general decay of the religion in the region, Yahya started to look for a knowledgeable person, someone who could help him revitalize Islam as the ruling force. On his way back from pilgrimage in Mecca, he stopped by Al-Kairouan, where he met Abu Imran al-Fassi, a scholar of the Maliki school. Yahya was impressed by the scholar's manners, piety, and asceticism. The scholar sent him to one of his students in the regions of Sus, called Wajjaj al-Lamti. Wajjaj in turn assigned his own student Abdallah ibn Yasin to help out Yahya in his mission. Abdallah ibn Yasin was like Yahya ibn Ibrahim from the Gudala tribe. He had spent 7 years studying in Al-Andalus under several renowned Maliki scholars. And just like that, this partnership laid the foundation of the Almoravids, with Abdullah ibn Yasin as the ultimate religious authority. Abdullah put himself to task, starting with the tribes of Lamtuna and Gudala, and taught them the fundamentals of the religion. But his religious zeal and strict enforcement of the Islamic rulings started to make him enemies. Abdullah's only option left was to flee and save his life. What happens next is blurry in history books and varies from one source to the next. There is, however, a narration that can be found in both Tariq ibn Khaldun and Ibn Abi Dhar's Rawd al-Kirtas, in which Yahya tells Abdullah about an island located on the river of Senegal where they could live and worship in peace. The word spread, and soon after, the Almoravids were 1,000 men strong. The armed struggle had begun. In a rapid succession of events, the Berber tribes fall into Almoravid rule, one after the other. In 1053, they took control of the desert city of Oudagost. In 1054, scholars from Siege al-Aledo sent a call to help for Abdallah ibn Yasin to rid them of their unjust rulers. The call is answered in the same year as the Almoravids sweep in and take over the area. In 1055, the Maghrawa region was the next region to fall. Yahya ibn Ibrahim dies in circumstances that are not clear, and Abdullah ibn Yasin places Yahya ibn Umar as leader. However, things are about to take a turn for the worse. A group of rebels break out in Gudala and Siege al-Aledo. Yahya ibn Umar and Abdullah ibn Yasin are forced to split their troops. As a result, Yahya ibn Umar is killed in 1056 in the Battle of Tabfarilla. which is arguably the first significant defeat of the Almoravids. His brother, Abu Bakr ibn Umar, eventually launches a campaign to pacify the last rebellions in the Sahara Desert. By now, they have managed to control most of the unrest across western North Africa, but are faced with a significant challenge: the Kingdom of Barghawata. To give some context, we have to go further back in time. In 744 CE, during the caliphate of Hisham ibn Abdul Malik, a self-professed prophet of a new Judeo-Christian religion by the name of Salih ibn Tarif started to spread his newfound religion in the region of Damascus. According to Ibn Khaldun, Salih ibn Tarif claimed to have received a new revelation from God, containing 80 chapters, from which some were named after famous prophets, like Adam and Noah alayhi salam. In his religion, his followers would fast the month of Rajab instead of Ramadan. They would pray 10 daily prayers instead of the required 5. The kingdom boasted a very powerful military force of over 20,000 men. For a long period of time, it managed to thwart any attempt at taking their lands. It was also ruled by a succession of strong leaders who saw to the prosperity of the kingdom. None of them were interested in military conquests. Instead, they preferred strengthening trade and diplomacy. They also consolidated all the tribes in the kingdom, enabling a long period of peace in their lands. Abdallah ibn Yasin and the Almoravids, now armed with a strong religious zeal and a stronger army, shifted their attention to the kingdom, determined to erase from the Maghrib any trace of this blasphemous religion. And so, in 1059, the Almoravids were at the doors of the infamous kingdom. The battle broke out. Abdallah ibn Yasin, the spiritual leader, suffered heavy injuries. As he was carried back to his war camp, he called on the senior members of the Almoravids and uttered what would be his final words. "Help one another for the sake of Allah. Do not fight or compete for leadership, for Allah grants dominion to whom He wills. Choose my successor, from whom you are pleased, one that will lead your armies, fight your enemies, establish the prayer, and fulfill the zakat." The battle was bigger than anything the Almoravids had faced before, but they were not ones to be easily deterred. They pushed through and managed to defeat their opponents, marking the definitive end of the Kingdom of Barghawata. A new period was ushered in. Abu Bakr ibn Umar, one of the senior members, was the new appointed leader. In 1061, as further rebellions broke out in the Saharan tribes, he decided to go back and pacify the region. In his absence, he appointed Yusuf ibn Tashfin, the best and most trusted man, to lead the northern part of the empire. Yusuf was a hardened warrior from the desert. He was used to a somewhat rugged life, and had no love for the luxury and extravagances that the Muslim emirs of Spain indulged in. He considered them weak, having more love for their lavish lifestyle than for the afterlife, to the point where they would fight each other for territory, even allying with Christians against fellow Muslims in some cases. Yusuf was different. His asceticism and love for the afterlife were a direct result of Abdullah ibn Yasin's teachings. Now that we understand a bit about who Yusuf ibn Tashfin was, let's get back to the main story. Abu Bakr ibn Umar was getting ready to depart to the Sahara to settle issues between his homeland tribes. In the absence of Abu Bakr, Yusuf ibn Tashfin would shine in strategic, military, and administrative tasks of the empire. Meanwhile, Abu Bakr was pacifying the last rebellions and protecting the south frontiers from the empire of Ghana. Once these matters settled, he came back to the north, expecting to take over the lead from Yusuf, but he didn't. It appears Yusuf prepared a welcome back ceremony for Abu Bakr's return, one worthy of kings. The two leaders met and dismounted, and the two men sat to discuss the future of Almoravid rule. Abu Bakr allegedly told Yusuf, "O Yusuf, you are my brother in faith and the son of my uncle. I do not see a better fit than yourself for the leadership of the country, and I myself long to return to our desert homelands. I only came to hand the power over to you. Then I shall be on my way." These two leaders were exemplary patrons of Islam, displaying a high standard of morals and exceptional behavior towards one another. With Western North Africa pacified under Almoravid rule, doors open up for them elsewhere, as the Spanish Muslim kingdoms facing the northern Christian kingdoms seek the aid of the Almoravids. What would follow would redefine Spanish Muslim history. During the 1080s, Alfonso VI's Christian forces were making significant strides towards reconquering the Iberian Peninsula from the Muslims. The culmination of this effort was poised to be achieved before the century's turn, had it not been for the pivotal Battle of Sagrajas in 1086. At this juncture, Yusuf ibn Tashfin and his contingent of Berber Almoravid warriors traversed the Strait of Gibraltar into Iberia, converging with Christian troops at Sagrajas. The outcome of the battle proved calamitous for Alfonso, who narrowly escaped, preserving his life in the face of a resounding defeat. Following the demise of his father Ferdinand I, Alfonso VI demonstrated remarkable strategic prowess, outmaneuvering his brothers Garcia and Sancho to ascend as the sole leader of Christian Spain. In the pivotal year of 1085, he stood at the gates of Toledo and laid siege to the city. The fall of Toledo proved to be a devastating blow to the Muslims, for the city stood as an imposing defensive bastion, and its loss granted the Christians a formidable vantage point from which they could launch further incursions into the heart of Muslim Spain. This event compelled the Emir of Seville to dispatch a delegation to the Almoravids. Accompanied by a missive to their esteemed Emir, Yusuf ibn Tashfin, requesting assistance against the Christian advances. The Almoravids, acknowledging the urgency of the plea, quickly mobilized their forces to cross the Strait of Gibraltar. Their arrival in Algeciras preceded a formal reception in Seville, hosted by Emir Al-Mu'tamid, although the austere Almoravids were indifferent to the opulent palaces of Seville. Before the impending confrontation, notable events unfolded. Yusuf, following the sunnah of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, dispatched an ultimatum to Alfonso. He presented him with three choices: converting to Islam, paying the jizya, or the prospect of war. An offer understandably rebuffed by Alfonso. Conversely, historical accounts suggest that Alfonso, in a diplomatic maneuver, sent an emissary to Yusuf ibn Tashfin, proposing a rendezvous on Monday, strategically avoiding Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the respective sanctified days for Muslims, Jews, and Christians. Sensing subterfuge, Yusuf perceived this proposal as a ruse, and promptly readied his forces for a dawn confrontation on Friday. As anticipated, at the break of Fajr prayer, the Christian armies emerged within the vicinity of Sagrajas. As the battle commenced, heavily armored Christian horsemen initiated a robust charge against the Muslim front line, injuring Al-Mu'tamid. Alfonso VI then led a subsequent charge against the Almoravid regiment commanded by Dawood ibn Aisha, exacerbating the strain on Al-Mu'tamid and Abu Dawood's forces. Upon learning of this development, Yusuf responded by dispatching a regiment of elite Almoravid warriors led by Sir ibn Abu Bakr, providing some relief. Undeterred, Alfonso managed to penetrate the Almoravid camp, prompting jubilation among the Christians. Simultaneously, Yusuf ibn Tashfin orchestrated a strategic maneuver, unleashing reserve troops to the cadence of drums. They flanked the advancing Christians with unexpected precision, resulting in a devastating counterattack. The Almoravids surged through the Christian ranks, leaving destruction in their wake, and compelling the surviving Christians to flee towards Alfonso. Observing his forces in retreat, Alfonso issued an order for them to stand their ground and fight. However, Confronted with an overwhelmingly disadvantageous position, the Christians were compelled to retreat with fewer than 1,000 men. In the aftermath, one of Yusuf's soldiers tracked Alfonso, inflicting an injury on his calf that would persist throughout his life. In this decisive encounter, the Muslims emerged victorious, as the routed Christians conceded defeat in the face of overwhelming adversity. Following the decisive battle, Yusuf redirected his attention to pressing internal matters in northwest Africa. Before his departure, he entrusted approximately 4,000 soldiers to the emirs of Spain, accompanied by explicit directives urging unity against the common Christian threat. Regrettably, despite the sound counsel Yusuf had imparted in 1087, discord over leadership once again became a prevailing issue among the emirs. Simultaneously, news of Yusuf's return to North Africa reached Alfonso. Sensing an opportune moment to act, he issued a call for assistance from his allied Crusader states against the looming Almoravid menace. Responding to the plea, the republics of Genoa and Pisa dispatched a combined armada of 400 ships and nearly 12,000 soldiers. The Crusader forces, upon landing on the eastern coast of the peninsula, initiated raids on the Andalusian Emirates. Faced with this perilous situation, Al-Mu'tamid recognized the imperative course of action. A swift return to North Africa to beseech Yusuf ibn Tashfin once more for assistance. Committed to his religious duty to protect fellow Muslim brethren, Yusuf graciously accepted the plea and initiated preparations for a renewed campaign. The Almoravids landed in Algeciras, and Yusuf rallied the emirs of different states with a primary objective: to besiege the fort of Aledo and expel the Christians from their occupied territories. On this occasion, the Muslim forces employed the use of catapults to facilitate the siege, unleashing their contents soaring through the air and crashing against the formidable walls of the castle. However, the Christians, anticipating such an assault, had diligently stocked ample supplies to withstand the onslaught. Furthermore, the challenging mountainous terrain posed a formidable obstacle, impeding the adequate mobility of the siege equipment, and thereby endowing the defenders with natural defenses. As the situation grew increasingly dire, not only were the supply lines disrupted, but the encroaching winter heightened the challenges faced by the besieging forces. To exacerbate matters, intelligence reports revealed the approaching troops of Alfonso, compounding the urgency of the circumstances. Faced with the prospect of contending with assaults from two distinct fronts, Yusuf found himself at a critical juncture. After a deliberate period spanning 4 months, he opted to lift the siege and strategically retreat to the city of Lorca. Upon entering the fort, Alfonso discerned the untenable position his troops faced. Recognizing the impracticality of holding the fort for an extended duration, he issued orders for his forces to pillage the fort and subsequently abandon it, relinquishing control to the Muslim adversaries. All things considered, the siege marked a modest triumph for the Muslims, as their primary objective of expelling the Christians from Muslim Andalusia had been achieved. Nevertheless, Yusuf found himself dissatisfied with the outcome. His overarching ambition persisted: to liberate the entirety of Iberia from Christian dominion. Moreover, the 4-month campaign only deepened his conviction that the emirs of Spain were ill-suited for leadership, driven solely by their desire to retain their thrones and lacking a genuine commitment to the welfare of the realm and its citizens. The Iberian Peninsula saw a tumultuous saga of political intrigue, shifting alliances, conquest, and betrayal. The situation was far from a simple clash of religions. Internal divisions among the Muslims led to petty states competing and even allying with Christians against Muslims. Mercenaries, such as El Cid, added another layer of complexity, fighting for whoever paid the highest price. To further complicate matters, Muslim petty states sought aid from the Almoravids, only to turn against them when they overstayed their welcome. And this is precisely where we left off in our last video. The Almoravids had crossed over to Spain quite a few times already, once for the Battle of Sagrajas in 1086, and another time for the Siege of Aledo, and each time they left instructions of unity to the divided emirs of Iberia. But each time the emirs went back to their old ways of disputes over territories and nights of drinking and partying. At this point, Yusuf ibn Tashfin decided enough was enough. He sent a delegation to Baghdad aiming to consult the Eastern scholars on the legitimacy of a full takeover of Islamic Spain. The embassy was led by Muhammad ibn al-Arabi, who brought with him a letter to the Caliph of Baghdad, Al-Mustadhir. The Caliph had heard wonders of the Berber Muslim Empire and their crushing victory over Alfonso VI's armies at Sagrajas. The famous historian Ibn Khaldun even mentions that they met the great imams of the era, most notably Imam al-Ghazali in Baghdad and Imam al-Turtushi in Alexandria. These imams gave them a verdict approving and justifying the full takeover of Al-Andalus. They deemed the petty kings not worthy of leadership and a disgrace to Al-Islam. Now armed with the legal ruling they had so wished for, the Almoravids started with the annexation of Granada, and its emir Abdallah ibn Balkan submitted after negotiations. Quite remarkably, the siege of Granada was witnessed and documented by its emir Ibn Balkan himself. He wrote a book during his years in exile detailing the events that transpired. The siege lasted 2 months, during which Yusuf ibn Tashfin and Abdullah ibn Balkan negotiated the latter's terms of surrender. The Berber subjects of Granada felt relieved at the turn of events, perhaps a little proud that their fellow countrymen came to take matters into their own hands. The traders and farmers were quite relieved at the takeover as they ended up paying less taxes to the Almoravid administration. Ibn Balkan was thereafter exiled to Armat, close to Marrakesh. His writings, in the form of poems, give insights into the sumptuous lives of the Taifa kings. Next up on the Almoravid bucket list was the city of Almeria, further in the east. The emir of Almeria, Al-Mu'tasim, who had heard the news of the fall of Granada, was terrified at the news of Yusuf's armies heading his way. Too old and too sickly to do anything about it, he eventually surrendered the city to the Almoravids, who entered the city and raised a flag, upon which was engraved from the Quran, "Whoever seeks a way other than Al-Islam, it will never be accepted from them, and in the hereafter they will be among the losers." Surah Al-Imran, verse 85. As the events unfolded, Al-Mu'tamid of Seville started to feel uneasy about the presence of the Almoravids that he had previously invited into Al-Andalus. He knew logically that his would be the next state on their radar. His territory, from its capital of Seville, was significantly larger than the other taifas. Sensing what was coming, he rushed to Cordoba, where he met Ibn al-Aftas of Badajoz, and advised him to pack his bags and flee. Yusuf would then successfully lay siege to Ronda, Cordoba, Seville, and Badajoz, the leaders of which were either killed or exiled to northwest Africa. The takeover was now complete. Everything seemed to go according to plan for the Almoravids. That is, before El Cid started to advance on Valencia, by playing the emirs of Zaragoza and Valencia against each other. Valencia, in particular, was governed by a puppet emir who paid tribute to the Christians, including El Cid. This city posed a challenge for the Almoravid army, despite their formidable reputation on the battleground. Even with attempts by Abu Bakr ibn Ibrahim ibn Tashfin and Yusuf's nephew, Abu Abdullah Muhammad, El Cid remained undefeated. The unlucky streak of the Almoravids, however, ended with the Battle of Consuegra, which took place on August 15, 1097, near the village of Consuegra, between the Castilian and Leonese army of Alfonso VI and the Almoravids under Yusuf ibn Tashfin. The battle soon turned into Almoravid victory, with the Leonese dead including the son of El Cid, Diego Rodriguez. Although they were unable to capture the fort of Consuegra, Yusuf was satisfied with the outcome and returned to Marrakesh. In 1099, El Cid died, some say out of sorrow from the death of his only son. Following his death, his wife Jimena assumed control until the arrival of another Almoravid assault in late 1100, led by Yusuf's trusted lieutenant, Mazdali ibn Salakan. After a 7-month-long siege, Alfonso and Jimena, seeing no hope against the Almoravids, set fire to the city's great mosque and abandoned Valencia. With this victory, Yusuf solidified his hold over eastern Al-Andalus. Yusuf went on to reach the age of 100 after leading the Almoravids for an outstanding 46 years. His son and successor, Ali ibn Yusuf, was viewed as a devout Muslim, but he neither commanded the respect his father had nor retained the complete loyalty of the alliance to which his dynasty depended. It is said that he lacked vigor, statesmanship, and political shrewdness, which triggered a chain of events that would end the dynasty after his death, at the hands of the Almohads dynasty. We need your support to continue making animated Islamic history accessible to all. Your contribution, starting at just $1 per month, goes a long way in fueling the passion and dedication we put into our content. Pledge your support by clicking the link on our Patreon page. To better understand the politics and many dynasties of Northwest Africa, check out our video on the Saadi state that sprouted centuries later.